Zadig Abraha is the Minister for Democratization, and he joins me from the capital, Addis Ababa.
What we want is peace. We have been trying to secure peace.
It turns out your troops have committed just as many war crimes as the other side. Are they ordered to do that, or are they out of control? Which is it?
No, we aim at holding our troops to high political standards.
The country's Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, won a Nobel Prize for making peace with neighbouring Eritrea. This time he's promised to bury his enemies in the northern region of Tigray. While they fight, more than 2 million people have been displaced and thousands face famine. Will Ethiopia's government stop the mass detention of Tigrayans? Will it end the humanitarian blockade on Tigray? And how does the government justify its crackdown on the media? All that and more on Conflict Zone. Zadig Abraha, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Good to see you, team. Same here.
Your government has promised to hold accountable any of your forces that violated human rights, especially those who committed acts of rape. How many of your soldiers have been tried and sentenced for these violations?
I cannot come up with a specific number because it is an ongoing issue. The investigation has not yet stopped. And since we have an ongoing conflict...
well, has it started? You say it hasn't stopped. Has it started?
Yes, it has started.
So people have been sentenced, have they?
It is. A number of people have been brought to a court of law. So the sentence has yet to happen. But still, the investigation is an ongoing one. More people, we believe more people will be answerable to this process.
So nobody has been sentenced so far. Is this what you're telling me?
No, what I'm saying and what I'm telling you is it is up to the courts. The government has committed itself, has organized a committee overseeing this process, and the government has also exposed itself to a scrutiny of comprising of UNHCR, Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. So when it comes to
I understand. I wasn't asking you about the process. I was asking you about the result, whether anybody has actually been sentenced so far.
I don't have a specific number now.
Has anybody been sentenced? I don't even need the number. Have anybody been sentenced so far?
Yes.
And are we talking about 5, 10, 50? Roughly how many?
I cannot come up with a specific number.
And can you tell me what the range of penalties has been so far?
Still, I don't have a number. I don't have a specific information with regards to that. But it is a publicly declarative. We started the
This isn't a very transparent process, is it, Mr. Abraha?
This is a very transparent process.
Well, it isn't. If you can't even tell me how many people have been arrested, detained, prosecuted.
It doesn't mean I don't have a number now, but it doesn't mean this is not a transparent process. We have shown our commitment to transparency, to accountability, by subjecting ourselves to a UNHCR scrutiny. So I don't think transparency is an issue here. It's just a matter of information, and I don't have it now.
Well, it is, according to the Office of the Human Rights Commissioner. She flagged up considerable concerns about your judicial processes. She said disturbingly that your court proceedings lacked transparency and didn't meet international standards. What's your excuse for that? You tell me there's transparency. She says there isn't any.
We have introduced a series of reforms with a view to making our courts up to the international standard, to making them transparent ones. And we have gone a number of steps when it comes to that. So I think one of the things where we can proudly say when it comes to our judicial process is for the past 3.5 years, we have introduced a number of reforms, and these reforms have yielded transparency and accountability. And if you were here to see it in person, I'm sure you would say that.
Why don't these trials take place in public with the press free to report on them?
Some of these things can only be presided by war courts, military courts, and if it happens to be civilians, then it will certainly be seen by a civilian court. But we have no problem with making it transparent. It's a matter of I never heard media having an interest on these things.
The media are very interested because it's not only important that justice is done, but justice has to be seen to be done as well, doesn't it?
This government has shown a high level of commitment to transparency and accountability, time and again. and making it transparent to a media it's up to the courts.
A joint report by the UN Human Rights Office and Ethiopia's Human Rights Commission was released last month. It turns out your troops have committed just as many war crimes as the other side. Are they ordered to do that, or are they out of control? Which is it?
No, we aim at holding our troops to high ethical standards. And we do know you have a number of reservations with regard to the outcome of that joint.
You accepted the report. You accepted the report.
Yeah, but we have reservation. With the reservation, we said, with the reservation, we accept the outcome. We have not only accepted the outcome, we have started implementing the recommendations indicated by the joint investigation by establishing a joint ministerial committee. So our army, when you talk of our army, we believe it exhibited ethics and discipline, but there are some outliers that have gone out of that have committed ultra-virus acts, that have committed these things, the atrocities indicated in the report, and we are committed to make sure that these individuals are brought to a court of law and get the sentence as per the law of the nation.
Not only have atrocities been committed, Minister, but Michelle Bachelet, the UN Chief Human Rights Officer, says it appears your forces, along with those of Eritrea, committed the majority of the violations for the first 8 months of the conflict between November 2020 and June this year. That's a hugely damaging observation for your government, isn't it?
It is regrettable that these atrocities happened. We have differences when it comes to the number of atrocities committed and who committed it. But with all that, we don't want to debate on the amount and the intensity of the atrocity. Whatever atrocity may have happened on one person or on two person, it doesn't matter. We don't want to tolerate it. We have zero tolerance to this kind of atrocities. But if you want to know the larger picture of our army has been throughout a number of African countries. It is an example of discipline and effectiveness, and that does not represent the larger picture of our army. But these are individuals that are being brought to a court of law, and we will continue to do so.
You say your army adheres to high standards, but there are a remarkable variety, a huge variety of serious crimes listed as having been committed by your forces. Attacks against civilians and indiscriminate attacks, for instance. November 28 last year, the report says your army shelled civilian facilities in Maዕkal, killing at least 29 people and injuring 34. Doesn't that shock you?
I said it's very regrettable when we don't tolerate this kind of action, this kind of violations. But it doesn't change the fact that our army has been chosen to be a UN member of US peacekeeping mission throughout Africa. And it is not without a reason. It's because of its exhibited discipline and ethics that it was chosen to oversee these kind of peacekeeping missions. But still, in Tigray, while our army was in Tigray, the larger picture is, the bigger picture is, our army has been supplying the people with food, with fuel, our army has been apportioning from its.
I want to come on to the question of aid a bit later, but before we leave these crimes, one of the categories highlighted by the report was sexual and gender-based violence, and the report says your army, along with other forces, was implicated in multiple reports of gang rape used to degrade and dehumanize victims. So these crimes, multiple reports of gang rape, these crimes aren't just the work of a few rogue soldiers, are they, as some of your colleagues have suggested? They're systematic, they're practiced, and they're repetitive. I wonder what would lead your troops to think those violations are acceptable.
There is no way. For one thing, I have said that we have accepted this report with reservation. And there is no way for any kind of rape to be systematic here in Ethiopia. Tigrayan people are our people. Our army was there to liberate Tigrayan people from the yoke of the TPLF, from the authoritarian hold of the TPLF. And there is no way for this to be systematic. It is only the act of individuals within the army. And we are making sure that these people are punished for their criminal deeds. it does not explain, it does not represent the act of our army, nor one can possibly say that this is systematic. If you want to see if it was systematic, there was no possibility for these people to be a court of law.
We now know, Minister, that terrible crimes were also committed by your allies from Eritrea. You told this program last December that you were 1,000% sure that there were no Eritrean troops in your country. In fact, they'd been there since last November, according to a Reuters special investigation. Why didn't you mention that?
Well, I thought there are no Eritrean armies right now, underlined right now, the word right now. And for secondly, we may have differences.
But the interview was in December, and the Eritrean troops were there in November, month before.
And when it comes to transparency, when the time came, when our intel showed that the Eritrean army was there, the Prime Minister has come up to the Parliament and talked about it. And then, we may have differences on intel. Your information will show you September. Mine was right after December. That's why. It was not said out of an intention to mislead the international community. It was said based on the information we have on the ground.
But it wasn't until March that Prime Minister Abiy revealed that Eritrean forces had entered Ethiopia, he said, to support him. Up until then, your government was dismissing all the reports as hostile propaganda. And in April, your information minister, Yemane Gebremeskel, said the reports about Eritrean troops raping Tigrayan women were simply fabricated stories. Fabricated by the party in power in Tigray, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front. That was nonsense. The stories were not fabricated. They did rape people, and they raped a lot of women, didn't they?
Well, I think the right person, I'm here to say, when the information we had on the ground was confirmed, we've come up in public and talked about it. While we lacked information, and we have appeared on conflict zone and came up with and said talked about my take of the situation. That's all.
In May, your Attorney General admitted that your Eritrean friends had executed 110 civilians in cold blood in a place called Aksum. What do you think of your Eritrean friends now?
Following the reform we introduced in the country, we have come up with a foreign policy that mainly gives priority to our neighbors, and that has changed the situation.
110 civilians murdered in cold blood. Are these people going to be held responsible by your government?
Yes, we have a good relation with Eritrea. We believe the Eritrean government will also be part of this effort to bring these people to justice. And we are not.
You are going to prosecute Eritrean soldiers, are you? Are you telling me now your government intends to prosecute Eritrean soldiers?
Whatever atrocity is committed by whoever, it will be prosecuted. Who is going to do this? Eritrea or Ethiopia? Or is it different? That's another story. What I can confirm you is no kind of human rights violation will be tolerated.
Are Eritrean forces still in Ethiopia? Your Prime Minister said in March that he'd got an agreement for them to leave, but they haven't left yet, have they?
They have left the country.
When did they leave?
Well, that specific time and day has.
Can you give me a month? Can you say whether it was a month ago, 3 months ago?
I don't want to be that specific, but I can assure you that Eritrean forces have left the country.
And you say that with the same kind of authority as you said a year ago when you said they weren't in the country.
Well, based on the information I had on my hand, I have told you that. Now, the information we have, the intel we have on our hand shows that, and I'm here to tell you.
Minister, part of the reason for a lack of transparency in Ethiopia these days is your crackdown on the press, which is something that you vehemently denied on this program a year ago. Your denials haven't held up very well, have they? The Committee to Protect Journalists said a week ago that since the start of the war, they've documented multiple violations of press freedom by your government.
We have got rid of draconian press law and came up with a new progressive press law. We have introduced, the following this reform, the press freedom in Ethiopia has increased in both in terms of number and quality. This is undeniable. This is something that speaks for itself.
On December the 1st, at least 9 reporters were in custody. If they've committed crimes, charge them. If they haven't, let them go.
Because as far as my information, the problem is our definition of journalism is even different. There are some social media activists that are working towards hampering rule of law, trying to cause havoc.
Look, at the end of October, I'll give you an example of what you've been doing. At the end of October, you forced the closure of the Orlo Media Center, an online news outlet that was critical of the Prime Minister. Before that, the Committee to Protect Journalists says media workers were arrested in late June and detained incommunicado for several weeks at a military camp in the east of the country. You detain these people incommunicado. This is mafia-style thuggery by your government, isn't it?
Let me tell you, there are journalists that are committing crime. And if that is the case, we will continue to make sure that even when it comes to journalists, their criminal deeds are punished. But we have seen for the past 4 years, we have stopped press freedom being the cause for journalists to be punished. That era is gone. This report has to be cross-checked. I have to check the names, the specific things, the specific information, because we are coming up with a laundry list of information.
I'll give you specific information, Minister. Court orders for the release of 2 journalists were given, at least 2 cases where court orders were given to release them from custody and they weren't released. Kibrom Worku, a radio journalist, and Tesfa Alem Tekle, correspondent for Nation Media Group. They were still in detention earlier this month, weeks after they were granted bail. Now, you present the picture of a government that ignores the rulings of its own courts. That's a lawless country, Minister.
What happened is the public prosecutor office appealed to the next level of court. And when an appeal is being heard, you cannot free a journalist.
Do you know, Minister, that your own Human Rights Commission has also expressed grave concern about the detention of thousands of people in the capital under your state of emergency and the difficulty of gathering information about the treatment of those in detention? Are they wrong too? Are they wrong too?
We are aware of that, and we are working day and night to correct that problem.
You're aware of it. You're in charge. Either you're in charge of the country or not. You're ordering these detentions. It's not enough to be aware of them, is it?
No. This is a practice of certain police, and we are in charge. We are correcting these mistakes. The thing is, we have introduced a state of emergency, and following that, there are people who are suspected of committing crime, and they are under the rule of law. They are being prosecuted, and in this process, there are wrongs here and there, and we are correcting them. We are taking, the result why our own Human Rights Commission has become stronger. It is coming up. It is issuing this kind of reports, which is exposing even our wrongs. This is the result of the transparency, the result of accountability measures we have taken.
You've also taken measures against senior UN officials. You threw out 7 of them in September. You didn't like them telling the truth. The expulsions were ordered 2 days after the UN's aid chief warned that your restrictions on the flow of aid had probably forced hundreds of thousands of people in Tigray into famine. Do you throw out the foreigners now because you don't like what they're saying about your government?
Not at all. We believe in working with the UN as a good partner. We are a member of the UN, so we will work with the UN under any circumstance. But it doesn't mean that these individuals were transgressing their own code of conduct, their own bylaws, and they were interfering in our internal issue. That measure was taken following that, and the government has explained the reason why we have taken that measure at that point in time.
The White House in Washington says that you have exhibited a pattern of obstructing the delivery of food, medicine, and other life-saving supplies to those who are most in need. I presume you're aware that blocking food and medical supplies without justification violates international humanitarian law, or don't you care?
That's wrong. That's not what we are doing.
Minister, this war is looking increasingly unwinnable. Will you negotiate, or are you only interested in outright victory?
We have a lot to gain in peace, and we have a lot to lose in the absence of peace. So what we want is peace. We have been trying to secure peace through informal and formal means, but TPLF gave all these efforts a deaf ear. That's why we are here. And, we have to wait a couple of weeks for these things to unravel themselves.
Minister, the Joint Investigative Report issued last month calls on you and the other combatants to immediately end hostilities without preconditions and end any measures that are exacerbating the already acute humanitarian crisis. Will you do that?
On June, we declared a unilateral ceasefire and withdrawn from Tigray. But TPLF said it was a sick joke. That's how our move for peace, our initiation for peace was welcome. We have a duty to protect our citizens.
You've all done unspeakably awful things to each other. How can there be reconciliation now?
We have no problem with reconciliation. We have no problem with peace. The TPLF has to go back to where it was. Now it is occupying a number of cities in Amhara region and committing atrocities. That has to be stopped. We have a duty to protect our citizens out there.
Your forces have committed atrocities as well. Let's be honest.
We take seriously any kind of allegation. And we are looking into that. We have taken a number of measures to correct that. But what is TPLF doing? If you happen to go to a number of cities, liberal cities in Amhara region, cities are destroyed to ground zero. Women are raped. Farmers are robbed of their yields.
Again, your forces have also been implicated in rapes. You seem to be very selective. You seem to be very selective in accusing the TPLF.
When it comes to us, we are taking this allegation seriously and taking a number of measures to correct it. We are bringing the perpetrators to a court of law. We are ensuring accountability and transparency. But TPLF is systematically doing that.
Minister, why did you reject a plan by the UN Human Rights Council to discuss what it called the grave human rights situation in your country in Geneva on December the 17th?
More than 50 plus countries have called on discussing the issue. No African country is a party to that move. It is and then African countries discussing about African issue. And the second thing is we have accepted the outcome of the joint committee, and we have also started to take measures. We have started to implement the recommendation by forming interministerial committee, and that's nonsense. Where we have taken these steps, why now? And the third thing is TPLF is committed.
The question is why not? What have you got to hide? What have you got to hide?
In Afar region, and this has remained. This is given a deaf ear. This is not, whether it is any human rights violation perpetrated by our forces or TPLF, it has to be taken seriously. It has to be put on par and investigated without discrimination or without allegiance. We don't see this happening. If there is this allegation committed by our forces and we see things being loud, why do we think other African countries have joined that move, are part of that signatory? Why do we think?
You tell me.
Because African countries understand that we have accepted the outcome of the joint committee, the investigation of the joint committee, and we have started taking the necessary measures. Where is the situation? And at the same time, other African countries are aware of the fact that TPLF is committing a number of human rights violations in a number of Amhara cities. And where this is the situation, it's a double standard. And as a result, they are not part of that signature. So this is not something where we are not the only country against this move. A number of African countries are against this move. That's why they are not part of this initiative.
You've called on everybody to reject this meeting. Looks like you have something to hide, Minister. You have something to hide.
If you had something to hide, we wouldn't have subjected ourselves to the scrutiny of a joint committee by the UNHCR and our own Human Rights Commission. That wouldn't have happened. We have allowed them to come on ground and check, investigate.
Minister Zadig Abraha, I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much for being on Conflict Zone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Samir.